welcome to a new episode of PR360. And I'm your host, Brett Dice. If you could please subscribe to PR360 on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Leave a review. It really does help with the rankings and let us know how we are doing. But this week, I have Tressa Robbins with me, and she is basically a pretty strategic leader with experience in customer onboarding, consumer advocacy, communication strategy and implementation, content creation and management, copywriting, social media strategy and management, public relations, content marketing, and a whole host of other things. That is quite a bit, and we're glad to have her on the show. So welcome to the show.
Brett. Yeah, you ran through the laundry list there.
I ran through the good bits of the laundry list. Let's just say that. But I gave actually, my first question is are you a coffee or tea drinker?
I heard that was the first question from listening to your other podcasts. And I used to drink coffee until it started kind of making me have a nervous stomach kind of feeling. And I tend to be an anxious person anyway, so I didn't like that. But I do still have to have my caffeine. So I am more of a Diet Mountain Dew kind of gal now. So that's how I start my morning.
Diet Mountain Dew. All right. I mean, hey, if it gives you caffeine, you enjoy it. Nothing I can do.
It serves its purpose.
Yes, it does. And more power to you if you can actually drink that and still look great doing it at the same time. And my first question as all my the next question I ask all my guests is, can you kind of give a brief overview more about your expertise? Because I gave a little bit about who you are, but can you give a little bit more about your background?
I'll focus a little more on kind of what I've been doing more recently. So I've been working in around the PR communications and marketing arenas for more years than I will admit to. Will suffice to say it's been in excess of 2 decades. I think once we get past that, it's a moving point. But I worked in corporate communications. I worked for a global PR agency, their office in St. Louis at the time. I taught several classes as a guest instructor at Southeast Missouri State University in their PR program, where I'm also the PRSSA chapter professional advisor. I'm a member of PRSA St. Louis and a past president and a past Midwest District Conference chair. So I stayed really involved. I've also more recently joined PRCA, which a lot of people in the U.S. aren't aware of, but they're based in the UK, but they are global. And more recently, for the past 10, 11 years, I guess, I've been doing customer onboarding at Burrell's, which is media monitoring and analysis, for those who don't know. And even more recently, the last couple of years, I've been managing the content and social media for the company as well. And then in the very little free time that any of us in this industry have, I've also done some freelance executive ghostwriting on the side. So I stay busy.
Yes, very busy. Yes. But branding and brand building has certainly changed on social media since the beginning. Since the beginning, no one really knew how to use it. Everybody was like, let's just be on it and try it out, maybe. But what do PR pros need to know to keep their brands on good standing on social media?
I think there's a few things. And you're right, though. Real quick, I'll go retro and say you're absolutely right. I remember when I first joined Twitter, if you can believe it, 13 years ago. In the very early days, I was literally just a sponge. And I followed all the quote unquote big names at that time, people like Seth Godin and a lot of others. And literally just followed the big fish and sort of mimicked their behaviors to figure it all out. It worked, obviously. But as far as brand building, I think there's a few things. For one, I'll use a little colloquialism that my grandfather used to use all the time. And when we go fishing, he used to say, you fish where the fish are. In other words, you go where people are, with social media anyway. You can't possibly be on every platform. I mean, there's new ones quite literally, cropping up every day. So I think it's important to be strategic. Think about where your target audience spends most of their time, whoever that is, whether it's consumers and what age group, you kind of look at who is your target audience. And you're going to base the platforms on that. For PR pros in particular, I think Twitter is still by far, still a big fan. I think it's one of the best platforms, especially for networking with others in the industry, for content marketing, for building your own personal brand and network. But also for companies, nonprofits, and big brands. I mean, there's no, it runs the gamut. Everything from someone with a couple of followers to those with mega, multi-thousand followers. I think the other thing that people sometimes, it's easy to let slide, is that you do have to stay active on those platforms. Whether that means posting 5 times a day, once a day, 3 times a week, whatever that is, it's still showing that you're staying active, keeps you visible. You can't just create an account and park it there and expect anything to happen. You have to put the effort in. Although I will admit that I joined a few platforms and then decided it wasn't for me and sort of made an exit. But usually what I'll do on those is put a little note saying, here, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, just so that there isn't what I would call a dead end in the breadcrumb trail that you want to leave for those folks. And then finally, don't be afraid to try out those new platforms. But also don't feel pressured to be everywhere the cool kids are. I have felt significant pressure to be on Clubhouse, and I've given it a shot. I realized it was not the best use of my time or for me. And myriad others that just happens.
Gotcha. And so, what are some of the new trends? I think you kind of discussed a little bit with Clubhouse, but what are some of the new trends coming to social media in general? Because it seems like there's always some type of new trend, but it seems like also podcasting has become a new trend at the same time too.
Podcasting is booming in the last couple of years, I think. But basically, that's where I was going to kind of go with this. It's audio and video. Whatever form that audio takes place, podcasting is one. And video, there are myriad use cases and types of videos that you can create and use. But audio and video are definitely sizzling hot trends right now. And it's been building. I think it really skyrocketed during the early days of the pandemic. But the interesting thing is it has shown no signs of slowing down. As a matter of fact, they're exploding. You only have to look at the boom of TikTok, right? I think I just read an article that they surpassed 1 billion users this past week or so. And as I mentioned, the rise of Clubhouse, although personally I prefer Twitter Spaces, mainly because I'm already there and I'm resisting yet another app on my phone. And even if you aren't creating content specifically for platforms like TikTok or one of the audio, audio or video, I think sometimes people forget that blogging is still, it's not new. It's probably the oldest form of getting your opinions and things out there. But blogging is still absolutely necessary. I mean, you have to have content to share with your brand building. Preferably your own content, but in addition to curating other content. And, makes it so easy now to convert a blog post into an audio file and or to do a video and then transcribe it and do audio. So from that one piece of content, which would in this case we'd say a video, you end up with 3 that can be disseminated across the appropriate platforms. So I would say that the bottom line is audio and video.
True. I mean that even goes into kind of next question about podcasting and or drop in drop out video, aka Clubhouse, aka Twitter Spaces. Actually, Discord left that space and is redoing it, but Facebook is trying to do it. Both of them actually. LinkedIn's trying to do it as well. They got rid of their, I guess, stories. So did Twitter. So they both got rid of stories, and now they're trying to go back with a different mindset. So, I mean, should companies be a part of it? I have a Clubhouse. I don't really use it. Spotify has Green Room, which is similar to it. I think it's interesting, but I just don't right now. I'm not really sure about it. I mean, podcasting is 2 decades old almost, like around two. It started in the early 2000s. I know that. So, I mean, I understand the drop in drop out video model. I understand that it could help with podcasting, but what about brands? How can brands actually use this? Could they do like live Q&A testing type of it? Like could they do something with it? Because right now everybody's kind of just trying to figure it out still even within Twitter Spaces.
I absolutely agree. I think podcasting obviously as your listeners certainly is still huge and growing literally every day. I know a coworker of mine wrote a recent post where he looked at some research, I think was dated back in June, but that research showed that there were over 2 million podcasts at that point in time. And I know people starting them literally like every week, it seems like, probably not quite that frequently, but that I know of people who I see post, hey, I started a podcast. But for the drop in, drop out, I think I completely agree with your thought process on that. I think it really depends on your overarching objectives and goals. If you're a solo PR practitioner or a freelancer, or if it makes sense, if you're basically your brand is yourself, as it would be in those cases, then it may make sense to participate in some of those drop in, drop out type platforms. But I think brands are still trying to figure it out. I know some have been on, at least Clubhouse, I've heard, although I didn't participate in it. But I agree. I think everyone's still kind of figuring it out. And I think they're evolving. As you alluded to, Twitter and LinkedIn gave it a stab and realized it was kind of one of those things nobody asked for, nobody wanted, and ultimately few people used. But I think as they evolve, for instance, I know Twitter Spaces. Again, I'm just more familiar with that because I kind of live on Twitter. Twitter Spaces has recently just started doing monetization and ticketed events. I think that gives a little more credence to it. I'm not sure exactly how companies and brands would utilize that yet. I get the webinar model for monetization and ticketing and things, but if all I'm doing is listening, I don't know, that might be a harder sell to get people to pay. I don't know. I think we may see adoption rates increase, but I think you're absolutely right. It's still, people are kind of feeling the waters, and I think it's too early to say absolutely yes, brands need to be there. That's my personal opinion. I know there are some people who disagree.
Well, I mean, it's fair. I mean, I think for the most part, what we have to think about with Clubhouse or drop in, drop out in audio as a sub genre from podcasting and audio is more of the Twitch, model of thinking, because Twitch is all about live streaming. I'm using Twitch because Twitch is literally all about live streaming. Like that's their whole business model is live streaming. YouTube kind of does it, but that's not their model really. It's all about uploading videos. So in a way, we have to, I guess, think about it in that type of model, but with audio. But you can't really see people, which I think for audio engineers or at least podcasters like me, drop and drop audio is fine, but the audio quality on your phone can't match this $350 microphone that I'm talking on right now. So I think there's something missing with it. Plus, you actually have to have a stable connection, which is another issue. Podcasting, you don't really have to. So, I mean, where do we go from here? I know everything's still new, so this is all just experimental hypothesizing, I guess is the best way of saying it. But where do we go from there? Because obviously it's something there, because these companies wouldn't be spending millions of dollars trying to implement this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's an area that I fully have my arms around. Part of it is simply because I have not seen it fit yet, or either my own personal brand or the company brand. I've never really been a fan of those, no pun intended, since Twitter just got rid of fleets, but yeah, of a fleeting type content like Twitter Spaces and Clubhouses. It's a conversation, which again may be great if you're maybe you own an agency or you're a solopreneur or something, but in the bigger sense of it, that's a lot of time and effort that's going into something that is proof gone, right? I mean, you're doing podcasts, which are essentially they're in perpetuity, and now adding video as a component, which again will have a long shelf life. I mean, the content itself, what we're talking about today, may not because of the nature of it, but it's still there's something tangible there, and I have a lot of difficulty sort of wrapping my arms around those that don't give you something you can tie objectives and goals back to.
So I'm hearing a lot is that, I mean, it's fine for brands to wait and see, but structure isn't there quite yet. So the structuring of podcasting makes sense because it's either me talking to the microphone into oblivion, or a co-host, or like we're doing right now with a guest. There's structure with that because there's been structure for that for a while. But with like kind of an open forum, basically an open forum like Clubhouse or anything like that, there really is no structure, because it's like I don't know how to moderate that very well when everybody can talk and you're now just really trying to yell in a club, basically, is probably the best way of saying it.
Yeah, I yeah, I think it just depends. I have PR friends that just rave about it and love it and use it frequently. But I'm kind of in your camp there. I'm not feeling it.
Mm. I mean, moving on to like the older stuff, like Instagram's moving away from photography and more into video because they're trying to compete with TikTok. So, I mean, what happens with pictures now? I mean, that used to be a staple, and now it's kind of like, well,
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't go to Instagram to watch videos. If I wanted to watch videos, I would go to a video platform. I go to Instagram to see friends' Well, I use Instagram personally. I keep my account locked down because it is for personal. I don't mix business with that particular account. We do pretty much in every other place of our life. That's my one little silo that's still mine. But I go there to see pictures of friends, their families, their kids, their big moments in life. When they travel, I love traveling vicariously through their photographs. So I don't know. I know I just read again something that said something about Instagram extending the, first they added reels to the video. Now they're basically replacing stories with reels, I think. And now they're looking at adding, they're putting reels in the timelines now. rather than going to another place to get them. And now they're experimenting. I think they're looking at. I saw this morning something about adding like 2 story videos. So I don't know. On Instagram and Facebook, I kind of like the idea of stories because occasionally there's something I want to just put out there for a fleeting moment, and I do want it to go away. But I don't know. I think that's one of the mistakes some of these platforms are making, is trying to be all things to all.
I mean, in almost social media tech terms, trying to keep up with the Joneses or the newest hot social media. And it's like, okay, where's your identity? And I think Facebook right now is in a really big identity crisis as it is right now because of all the terrible press. Yeah. But how do PR pros keep a hold of all this stuff? I mean, I have my Feedly, I have all the tech stuff. I break it down from the marketing, tech, gaming, podcasting news. I actually follow podcasting news. There is one email newsletter that actually tells me what's going on with it. But how do we all keep this straight? And like, I was like, oh, where did the Facebook stories or the Instagram stories go? Didn't remember it going away, but apparently it went away last month. So it was like, how do I keep a hold of all this stuff? How do PR pros keep this manageable so they're not caught off guard and their whole content strategy is thrown out the window because one social media company decided to not do something because it's not quote unquote cool anymore?
It's a constant game of adapting. And I think in one aspect, PR professionals and communicators are pretty adept at being agile and to use the term that's been so incredibly overused this past year, pivoting. But in this case, it's absolutely true. You kind of have to move your strategy. When they change, you have to change. And that is kind of, I think, any social media manager's complaint is that just when you think you know the game, the rules change again. And in some cases change mind-numbingly fast. So keeping track of it, I am like you. I have an RSS feed that I use. It's not weekly, but I literally had a panic attack back in the day when Google Reader was going away because I'm like, no, because that's where I can select the media I want to hear from, right? And so most of the ones that I follow, I get a lot of stuff on them. So even when they're just testing something, I know social media today is one that is incredibly helpful to me for keeping track of which platform's doing what and kind of keeping that ear to the ground or, eye out for something that may be coming. But just because they're testing something, as we know, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to ever become a live product or be a thing. But it keeps you thinking, okay, if they did this, how would I adapt to it? Or does that just not make sense for me?
And even more going to the content creation side of it, I mean, how do we keep the verticals all in order? Because you have video, audio, now audio only. Do you start a podcast? Do you not start a podcast? Do you just become guests? Do you just keep to the tried and true and just do pictures all day long because it's the easiest, for the most part, cheapest way of creating content? Because video is a lot of just upfront costs. You got to get the right camera, you got to find the host. And even with podcasts, it's more time consuming than expensive. So how do we keep all that verticals in order? Because I feel like PR pros are now just like media, like managers of like, okay, what goes what?
I think, the old adage being a jack of all trades and master of none became a reality for PR years and years ago. But we do have masters of those. So I don't think that everyone has to be a master at audio production or video production. I think it's better to hire people like you and others who have the equipment, have the know-how, mean, here's a great example. We're changing up some things at Burrell's, and I've been working on a couple of product marketing videos. But all I'm doing is the raw video portion, showing the steps, on screen, recording that, and then sending it over to someone else who adds a voiceover file from a voiceover artist, because I hate my voice and I didn't want it to be mine on the video. And then a third person that actually edits all of that together. And I think in a way that kind of makes room for freelancers or people who have expertise in video and audio production and editing and all of that. I also do know several PR professionals or practitioners that have become audio or video production specialists, and now that's sort of one of the tools in their arsenal that they can offer their clients. But I think that's a very personal decision that you have to make if you're going to kind of move that in that direction, because I do think it takes you in a little bit different direction. I don't think you can be all of it.
It's really difficult. I mean, there are a lot of different tools out there that will help you with the audio editing. Like Descript is another really popular one that will basically take out all the ums and uhs automatically. It works pretty well, actually. I've used it a couple times, but it's expensive because it's a monthly cost, and there's a subscription for everything now. Like I can't get rid of the subscriptions now, which is funny because it was like, oh, this is not bad. I pay monthly, and there's a few here and there, but now everything's like, no, you got to pay a subscription. It's like, well, I don't have money for that every month. I mean, that's like thousands of dollars every month.
I actually just saw there's an app. I don't remember the name of it, but it is designed to help you keep track of all your your recurring subscription costs. Because for so many of us, they quickly get out of control, and you don't realize how much you're spending every month. It's a little crazy.
True. Yeah, and I mean, how should PR pros, even more from a personal side, care about their own personal branding? Because I feel like personal branding and company branding is now so intertwined that any little thing that you did 20 years ago could really have ramifications now, even though people obviously change, people grow. But in the social media realm, if you make one mistake, it's kind of there for everybody to see for a while until the next big controversy comes, and then they forget about you until they find something else about you. So how do we take care of our own personal branding, or PR our own personal branding, while doing PR for the company, so we don't screw it up for the company in general? Because it's always screwing up somewhere.
And I think I especially am extremely cognizant of that fact, mainly because I had started my own personal brand before, at least on social media and all of that, before the company really got on board with it. But from day one, I am by far the most visible online. That's what I'm talking about, visible online person in the entire company. And so I know very well that anything I say or do has the potential to reflect back on the company, even though it's from my own personal account, it's from my own personal viewpoint and opinion. And for a long time, I think that kept me from expressing a lot of opinions, especially on places like Twitter where everything's wide open. But over the years, I've gotten a little more comfortable in my own skin. It's okay for me to have my own opinions about certain things that are happening in my locale. I try not to generalize them more broadly so that they, it's specific. This is what I'm talking about here in Missouri or here in this part of the country or something like that. But it is definitely a balancing act. And I think if anyone is going to err, they should always err on the side of caution, especially younger professionals who may not realize the long-term consequences and how unforgiving this industry can actually be.
Yeah, I mean it's true, but the old adage is everybody makes
That's true.
mistakes.
That's
So
true.
now all of a
I
sudden
think a
it's
lot of it gets blown out of proportion. Yeah, absolutely. One person says one little thing and all of a sudden it's a crisis. It's like, yeah, take a beat. Well, and yeah, I really do believe there ought to be a statute of limitations on opinions because let's face it, social norms and things have evolved in the last 15, 20 years since the first social media platforms came on. All I can say is thank goodness MySpace is just gone. Once I'm gone, but I'm pretty sure I deleted my old account on there from 20 years ago. But even now, every once in a while, I'll have a very early Facebook post that'll crop up in my memories that it'll show me, and I'll just roll my eyes so hard. But did I really like that? It's not that it's anything bad. It was just silly. Back then it was things like I'm eating breakfast. Here's what I'm having. It's just. But yeah, yeah. Well, right. I was playing by ear, and just figuring it out. Everything now is done with much more intention. But I do believe it is a very, very, very much a balancing act. But again, I think communicators in general, I don't think this is out of their wheelhouse. I think that that's something we should be used to.
we should be, but doing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week can probably make your judgment call a little bit worse eventually too, because you only have so much energy to focus
Sure. And
on
I'll be honest,
things.
I've deleted
So
a
I
tweet
mean,
here or there when I was having a really bad day and maybe said something much more negatively than I see the next day. And I'm like, okay, I just need to ditch that. But never harmful or mean spirited.
yeah. So PR pros out there, just be mindful of what you say and also try to be future telling at the same time because things change even though they're way out of your control, especially 10 years from now.
Probably pretty good advice. In the last 10 years, we know that. So I don't think that's surprising.
No, but it's always a good wake up call, I guess, because that's been going on that you say when you're younger, because you're just trying to figure yourself out at the same time as being on social media at the same time. But moving on to, I mean, working from home has now become synonymous with just working now in general. I mean, the pandemic basically made it working from home was just a de facto. And now some businesses are trying to be like, well, you need to come back to the office every once in a while. But what are some effective ways of getting work done while working from home? Because I think Microsoft did some new research saying that working from home, you do get menial tasks done, but the innovation, like parts of it and the more the creative parts, may not actually be as good than working with people face to face. So, how do you still get work done and do great work from working from home?
First, for those who aren't watching the video and listening to the podcast, my eyes just rolled so hard I think I have a headache now because yeah, I'll let you in on a little secret that's not so secret anymore. I've been working remotely for 24 years. I've been working remotely since we didn't call it remote working. As a matter of fact, back then we hid the fact that I worked remotely. I don't know if you may remember, some of the younger listeners may not, but remember the old mailboxes, etc., places where you could get an address there, right, to receive mail. I had an address there under the company name, and that was my quote unquote office address. But I worked from home. Now, even back then, I've always had a dedicated office space. I've been lucky or fortunate that I have a whole room in every home I've lived in since then. I've dedicated one room. When I come in this room, I'm at work. When I go out that door at night, I close close it and I'm off work. But it wasn't always that way. That's come with experience and age, I think, being able to set a little more clear boundaries. But I roll my eyes at those who say, you know, you can't do things creatively and that kind of thing, or collaboratively, remotely. You can do anything if you truly want to. I have times when I have to focus, when I have a blog post due. Of course, most of these are deadlines I've set for myself, so theoretically I could break them, but I really honestly try not to, because that's a bad habit to get into. But so if I have a blog post due, I know that I need about 4 hours of uninterrupted, heads down, focused time. And I've talked to my boss, worked it out. I log off of Teams, I log out of email. Anything that's popping up and trying to get my attention, I log out of it all. Now, I do still have those on my phone. So my phone buzzes if it's, and I can glance over to see if it's urgent enough to open the app, but probably not. Probably someone just has a quick question for me and it can wait. So I think, sure, read those studies, read those reports. But when I read them very selectively, because I know my case and I know my situation, that again, you can do anything from anywhere if you really have the desire to do it and to succeed. I guess I'm proof of that, which is what I'm saying.
Hey, what better way to ask somebody that's been successful at it for a long time?
I think it was to my benefit, obviously, when the pandemic hit and everyone all of a sudden just sort of went into panic mode. First of all, Burrell's already had a lot of people working remotely, not as long as I, but some, and it really hasn't been that big of a difference for me personally. It was almost no difference. Literally, masks were about the only thing that changed for me. I live in a very rural area by choice. In recent years, we left the city because I rarely travel anymore, and I'm still within a couple hours of the airport. So, ordering things online, for instance, for shopping, I've had to do that since we moved to a very rural, remote area. We don't see people a lot of times because we're so remote. So again, I feel fortunate that my life was much less upended than most of my colleagues and most people in general out
there. All right, and fun question for you: if you could create your personal brand, how would you do it? If you could recreate,
you know what? I probably got a really boring answer to this. I'm thinking about it, and I don't want this to sound arrogant. I don't really have many personal branding regrets. I have a couple here or there, but they weren't anything that were earth-shattering. So, because for the most part, my personal brand is who I am. It's hard to look inward and say, what would I change about me? I mean, sure, there are things, but those things usually get reflected in a public forum. I don't think I'd change a whole lot. So like I said, that's probably a really boring answer, but I think if you build your personal brand properly and it is true to who you are, then you evolve and your brand evolves with you. But it's not that I would go back and change who I was 10 years ago, which is what I feel like I would be doing if I started over.
All right, hey, it's your own personal brand, so if you love it,
I don't know if I love it, but it's me. So what you see is what you get. Here I am.
That's fair. Any final thoughts for listeners?
I'm always thinking about students. So I'm hoping that we have a few students who will take a listen. I will certainly help share it to those that I know. I think I probably have two little pieces of final thoughts. One would be, and this actually goes for anybody, surround yourself with people you admire and respect. You can't go wrong, and you will learn so much in the process. I've learned so many things from so many amazing women in PR and men. And if I could only give future PR practitioners one piece of advice, it would be, I used to say read, read, read. Now I'll say read, consume, listen, or watch, whatever those are. That is the best way to learn and to make friends and to build your own brand and network in the process.
All right. Thank you, Tressa, for joining PR 360 and sharing your knowledge on everything PR. We really
Thanks,
appreciate
Brett.
it.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to PR 360. As always, please subscribe to PR 360 on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Leave a review. It really does help with the rankings and let us know how we're doing. And join us next week as we talk to another great thought leader in the PR industry. All right, guys, stay safe, read, consume, listen, do whatever you need to stay up to date with what's going on.